East, you see a lot that's happening in our region. If you're advising an entrepreneur who's working to find an investment in the current market, what advice would you give them?
Sure. Excuse me. I think probably two things, and there's a lot of generic advice and good advice that's out there. The generic advice is actually accurate, but if I were to think more specifically, one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is that not all good money is good money. Not every investor strategy is going to align with what you are building. So understand that not all no's mean the same thing, right? You need to find an investor that's already looking where you're heading, and that's the right investor for you. So don't get discouraged by every single no. Make sure that you understand your business and your potential outcomes well enough to find investors that are aligned with what you're building. The second bit of advice I would say is know your numbers extremely well. For me, your financial model or projections are just a numerical representation of your strategy. If they're not in sync, they'll get exposed very quickly. More importantly, in this world current environment where capital was frothy 2 or 3 years ago, but now people are being a bit more selective about when they invest and how much they invest, it's helpful for you to know exactly how much you need. I too often find founders that tell me, I need $1 million. And like, how long would that last you? What are you gonna do with it? Do you really need it, right? Like, and there can be a longer conversation after this, but the reason why you wanna be intentional is that for every milestone you hit with your business, the value of your business will increase. So it's very easy to say I need $3 million right now, but in this environment, if you can only get 500,000, what is that 500,000 going to get you? And the only way that you can be flexible with that and react to the market and make sure that you're always moving forward with your funding is that you understand your numbers as well as you understand your story.
That's fantastic and really helpful. I hope everybody's out there taking notes as you think through these, because you're hearing from Kwame on the venture side, and Dennis, we want to hear from you on the debt side. So one of the things that we've seen, much as Kwame talked about, we had a point where money it felt like just falling out of pockets for quite some time, kind of coming out of the stimulus at the 2020, 2021 period. What are we seeing right now in kind of a macro space for lending? It seems like we've had some level of pullback. What are you seeing in that regard, and maybe how would you help people think through this?
So, as lenders, we've been observing notable market trends in relation to funding needs and a discernible pullback in the macro lending space. Recently, also, there's been a growing demand for funding among small and medium-sized businesses. Entrepreneurs are seeking financing to support various aspects of their business. We're seeing a lot of expansion among existing businesses right now. Business acquisition is very strong. We're seeing a tremendous amount of activity in the franchise space, and we're even getting a lot of new requests for working capital. So businesses are seeking financing. We're, in the same time, concurrently, we've also witnessed a pullback in the macro space. So that's driving more business toward the government guaranteed sector. And there are several reasons for that. Several factors contribute to it. One significant factor is the inherent risk aversion stemming from economic uncertainties and the market fluctuations we've experienced. Lenders are taking a more prudent stance to manage potential risk and to protect their lending portfolios. Also, there's been regulatory changes that have created stricter lending standards, and that's influenced the lending landscape. And while the intent's to reduce risk, what happens is that creates challenges for small business people who are seeking financing. But it's important to note that despite the pullback, there are still opportunities available for businesses to secure funding. The SBA programs in particular have played a crucial role in providing support and access to capital to entrepreneurs. Additionally, there are alternative funding sources such as online lenders, crowdfunding platforms, and CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, have kind of emerged as an alternative to traditional bank lending. So those are out there. So, while we're experiencing a tightening on the macro level, there are still viable channels for financing and opportunities for small businesses to start, to grow, and to flourish. In today's environment, it's really critical for lenders as well as entrepreneurs to really keep abreast of the market changes, to know what's going on in the market, and that'll help you plan for the future. It's also important to explore alternative financing options. There's venture capital and a lot of things out there that are viable options. But I think one of the most important things as a lender is to foster collaborative relationships between lenders and participation among lenders. So together as lenders, we can help more business people if we work together than working alone.
I think it's an important point. What you'll hear and see throughout the day is you're going to see a number of lenders that are in here. And what we encourage people always to do is start seeking money before you need money, because you need to grow that relationship and you need to understand how to foster that environment. So that's a really important point. You were talking about alternative things or different models that didn't exist before. So I want to bounce over to Haley. Haley, you're working with Generator, and for those that don't know, I'll ask you to give a little bit of context to that, but it's an accelerator program. What are you looking for when you're trying to give guidance to people who are thinking about the potential of an accelerator program as potential opportunity for either preparing for funding or even taking on an equity investment type of environment?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. And thanks for having me here today. I think Kathleen's comments earlier this morning gave a great framework of what are some of the things you should be thinking about if you're exploring raising capital or accessing capital in some way or another. There are a lot of things to consider, a lot of moving pieces in terms of what is the person on the other side of the table making their decisions based on. The role we take through our accelerators is being a guide for you to help understand what that other person on the other side of the table is thinking about. I'll talk more about the different programs we run later this afternoon, but at the core, we're working with founders of different companies to understand what is your best path forward to be successful. The program we run here in Mobile is a pre-accelerator where we're really working with a lot of different types of companies to understand, is venture capital the right path for you to pursue? And if so, what can you be doing to be most successful on that journey? If it is not, what are these other alternative options like lending or grants or funding through your own revenue or some of these other things? The biggest advice that I think I give on a regular basis to founders that I'm meeting with that may be considering an accelerator or other options is understand where you fit in this complex layer of different types of funding and motivation. And if it is venture capital, as Kathleen has shared, there are some very specific things that investors want to see in terms of your growth, the speed of that growth, and what the end state of your company looks like in terms of who owns it at the end of the day, and that not being you. And so really getting to the bottom of what you want to see for your company and then how that fits into the landscape. And if that is something that feels very overwhelming, you're not alone. And that's what programs like our accelerators are designed to do, is to help you navigate that and understand those things and pull some data in terms of what is a reasonable revenue number that I need to have for my company to raise a certain amount of money. How fast do I need to be growing for an investor to want to invest in me? How big of a market do I need to be trying to grow into for an investor to be interested in this? Those are the type of things we can help navigate and understand, as well as making introductions to people that can give you that sort of advice or potentially make an investment. Quam has been very engaged in our work and talks to a lot of our companies across the Southeast. The work that Cynthia is doing at Incubate Alabama has made all these programs possible. That is the reason we're able to offer these at no cost to startups, is because of the work that Incubate Alabama has been doing. So really being a bridge to these different relationships is something that we hope to do through our work.
And information and access is such an important piece. And I think, Cynthia, I'm about ready to get a t-shirt that says, "Ask me about SSBCI." There you go. I think that's a great one, because this is a conversation that we've been having for quite some time as we think about this. And Innovate Alabama is right at the cusp of some really exciting things. So for those in the audience that have never heard that delightful acronym, and we don't have a bingo. I feel like an acronym bingo would have been perfect for today. We don't have it, but you might get it if you hit SSBCI. Tell us what it is, and tell us, what does that look like for the state of Alabama?
So I am going to say since December 1st of 2022, SSBCI, which is the State Small Business Credit Initiative. Don't worry about what it means, just look up SSBCI. That program has definitely been a labor of love for us. And when I say
I was going to say, that was a really nice way you phrased that.
Real labor. Lots of work. This is actually the 2.0 version of this program. It actually did exist a few years ago. For the state of Alabama, though, it took on a very different flavor. It was more of a lending program. So this time around, what the U.S. Treasury did was sort of look at our census and decide how much money we should get, number one, which is very important, and then number two, how that money would be divvied up in terms of demographics of businesses that would be using those funds. So they have, under SSBCI, there's a category called SETI, which is socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. So almost everybody in this room is probably a SETI. Let's start there, because I think a lot of people think of it as a way of excluding, but it really is not. If you look at the definition, because of the nature of the state of Alabama, almost everybody is a SETI. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. Our portion of that funding is about almost $98 million. The state of Alabama is a little bit delayed in getting our funding. Most of the states started about 3 years ago. But that's okay, better late than never. Because I think even though it's taken us quite a bit of time to get the program structured, I think that it's structured in a way that will help all businesses within the state of Alabama. So the way we've structured the program, we've taken our $97 million and we've split it into debt and venture. So I think the venture team, the venture equity guys were like, 25 million is not enough, you need to give us more. I think 25 million is a really good place for us to start in the state of Alabama, since we're not quite sure how we're going to invest in technology and high-risk companies. So we're going to start with 25 million. The remainder of those funds will go to the debt program. So on the lending side, we work with community banks, we work with large banks, we work with CDFIs for them to come in, partner with us, and then get those funds out to the entrepreneurs who need them. On the debt side, we have 3 programs. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because that's all in the back for you to just pull one of those. But we try to structure that program so that if you have collateral and you want to use that as your means of making your loans, there's loan participation, where, as you talked about, lenders can partner together with us or with each other to sort of work through how you deliver that capital to founders. And then loan guarantee. I think that vehicle is probably most known just based on how it aligns almost to some of the SBA things that you're already accustomed to. So that's the way we've rolled out that program. I'm so excited to say that we have gotten our approval, and we should have our funding hopefully by the end of this week. So there
you go. Yeah, no, that's worth it. That's worth it.
So by the end of this week, so we're already registering lenders on our portal. Lenders can go in and register so that they are ready to go. They can start building their pipeline of founders that they're going to work with, and I hope that if you're a founder, if you're a CDFI in the room, please go to the website. Get this card, go to the website, look up SSBCI, and there's a lot of information for you there. On the same side, we have I don't see Gia here, but we've been involved with some of the founders here in the local space in Mobile. And on that side, on the venture side, the 25 million, we're going to get all of these funds in 3 tranches. So our first tranche will be about $27 million, thereabouts. And a portion of that will go to venture, a portion of that will go to debt. What we're doing right now on the venture side is We're registering. We haven't opened it yet for the funders, for the guys who are looking to invest. We haven't opened up the portal for them yet, but we will do that hopefully by Friday. So they get to go on and say, I'm a legitimate organization. We were talking about that earlier. We're only looking for legitimate funds and investors, not people who are trying to take advantage of people. Treasury has given us some really good guidelines to help us vet those people before we allow them into the program. And then we're looking for our founders so that we can sort of do that match. Everyone's not going to be venture backable, so venture is not the answer for everybody. Those high growth companies, those companies that are scalable, focused on innovation, technology, we're gonna push those founders to venture if they're venture ready. If they're not ready, they're gonna work with the technical assistance organizations, which is the SBDC, and also the Chamber of Commerce in Mobile. Those are the two organizations that will partner with us to get these funds out. So it's a really exciting program. Guys, look, we need to get to our second tranche by December, so I need you guys, if you're founders, to really blow up the phones of Walt and Rodney to get access to these funds really quickly, because we want to go after our second tranche in December, recognizing that the program is only 7 years. We've already let pass 3 years, so almost 4. So we don't have a lot of time to get this capital out. If we don't use it, we lose it. We're not losing it. The other thing I'll say, one final thing, is in regards to the SETI goals. So what are SETIs? Females, African Americans, non-English speaking people, other minorities, people in rural spaces, veterans, very small businesses with less than 10 people, disabled service veteran-owned individuals. So almost everybody in this state is really a SETI. And so we've got a certain amount that's allocated for SETIs, but don't be discouraged, because if you're not a SETI, there's still like $70, $80 million that you can apply for. So it literally does include everybody. Our goal is to get those funds out to everyone so that we can build our economy for longer term and then sustain that over time.
And I think that's incredibly important. You see here, right here, the magic of numbers is that when investments happen, that $1 functionally is going to turn into about 6.
7 to 10.
6 to, okay,
goal.
7 to 10. There you go.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the impact of growth. Once investment starts happening, it leads to the opportunity for more to happen, because this is in essence, a revolving process over those 7 years that Cynthia was talking about. Okay, so venture, we're sitting here, we're thinking about this. Kwame and Haley, you guys you both sit in a really interesting space as it relates to ventures. Haley, you're seeing them typically a little bit earlier than Kwame, or hopefully you're seeing a little bit earlier than Kwame. But I know a lot of times the gaps, the challenges are the issue. So talk to us a little bit about what you both see holding entrepreneurs back, and what are the major gaps that they typically need to work on early?
I failed to mention earlier, and I should mention, in addition to running programs and supporting startups, we invest in startups as well, and at the very earliest stages. So across Alabama, we have 3 programs where we're investing between $60,000 and $100,000 in startups. That is usually before an institutional investor is going to come in. Again, because this is the highest risk part of the industry, this is where there aren't a lot of players, and it can be really hard to get capital. What I see a number of founders struggle with at those early stages is balancing this chicken or egg of, I need money to grow, but I need to grow to get money. And unfortunately, I don't have a great solution to that right now to tell you, here's the magic answer, other than if you cannot demonstrate that you have something that is solving a problem that people have without money, it is going to be incredibly challenging for you to convince any investor to give you money to do that. And so that doesn't always mean you need to be generating revenue, but you need to be showing that someone in your target market wants what you have, and they are willing to do something. That could be signing a agreement of some sort, that could be signing up for a wait list. Ideally, it's giving you some type of money. If you are betting on the idea that that has worked in the past in what I call the good times pre, 2023. And particularly if you are in certain social circles in major tech hubs on the coast, but in communities that we work in, that is very hard to come by. And so the biggest tip I would have for founders working at that stage is figuring out how you demonstrate that demand early on and start building that track record that there is something that you're doing that someone wants. And so, again, that's where we can help startups figure that out and work through that, but that is a very real challenge that I think everyone deals with in some way, and getting past the hurdle of I can't do anything until I get a check is one thing that can make a big difference down the road if you figure out a way to get going in the first place.
Yeah, and Kwam, you used the word no, like earlier. Like that's a reality. You have to say no the vast majority of times, I assume.
To people I really like sometimes.
And right? Okay, so that's hard, and it's not an offense, but what does somebody need to be thinking about so that they can figure out when you're going to say yes?
I think an easier, like, mnemonic, if you will, is understanding where your business stands on the scale of traction versus defensibility. I'll meet really great CPG founders that's, I've got this really great product, I wash my hair with it, look at it, it's really good hair, can't you tell?
You
should
too?
invest. It works wonders, and it's great, but like, I don't, in the CPG space, for example, that's a brand game. Getting people to buy your product, there's so many products out there. It's hard for me as an investor with all this hair I have to know that, like, that is the one that's going to make it, right? But so for you, like, the more that you're able to prove traction, getting in the market and selling, et cetera, it makes it easier for me to then think about potentially investing, right? The other side of this is there are CPG investors that spend all their time in that space. You should be talking to more of them and less generalists, right? But on the other end, right, defensibility, you're building something that's a high-tech solution. If you can put this in front of me and say, no one else is doing it this way, and you can show me that you understand the competitive landscape well enough and benchmark yourself against all this competition, now I'm intrigued, right? Because even if you don't have a ton of traction today, it looks or appears as it could be very hard to replicate or duplicate what you've built, right? And so I was having this conversation with a founder late last night, unfortunately, but he was very, like, nervous. And he was very confused, like, how are all these AI companies getting valued at $50 million in his business and getting valued at $50 million a seed round? Like, they've got 6 or 7 term sheets. You don't have a term sheet yet, right? So the market, your valuation is always based on what the market is willing to invest in your business, regardless of how you feel about it. But 2, they've built something that the barrier is very, very high, right? I can't go and build OpenAI tomorrow and come back and compete with them. I don't have the bread, I don't have the resources, I don't have the time, I don't have the team, I don't have it, right? So the companies that are building something like that, they're going to get higher valuations. If somebody else can come and build what you're building in a shorter period of time, it's going to be a lot harder to get funds to invest. And it's just a reality that if founders kind of understand the decision matrix behind most funds earlier, it makes for more palatable and easy conversation. You better know how to prepare.
And that's what MoneyFest really is about, is how do we get that conversation started early so that if you're building something and you're trying to seek either the debt side or the equity side, this is something that you're beginning to think about. What are they looking for? What should I be thinking about? What's that matrix look like? So that's an important thing. And Dennis, kind of flipping over to the lending side, let's say somebody's out here and they're thinking, you know what, I've heard about this SBA loan thing. I don't know what SBA stands for, but I'll figure it out one day, or I'll Google it. What direction are you giving them as they're thinking about that to understand, like, is a loan the right thing for them? And how should they begin preparing for it?
So that's important. And if you've heard of SBA loans or you're familiar with it, there are two types of SBA. Well, there are multiple types of SBA loans, but if you're familiar with like the PPP program or the EIDL program, those are loans that come directly from the SBA, directly to the businesses. However, the type of SBA loan that I do, I work for a local community bank, and we use a government guaranteed program. So it's like an insurance policy. The banks will lends the money, and in case of default, well, then the SBA would come up and pay us a certain percentage of that to mitigate our risk. So we're able to lend more money and take greater risk because we have this additional guarantee. But the single most important thing that you can have as a founder is a well thought out, detailed business plan. That's the first thing I look at when somebody approaches me. I ask them if they have a business plan, and we read it. We read every word of it. Our underwriter reads every word of it, and then we ask questions. A lot of times that business plan is used to provide the credit memo that we use to ask for the funding, because it needs to be well thought out and tell everything that we need to know about your business and your funding request in the business plan. So that's, to me, that's the most critical thing. The next thing is, and I advise every business person that I talk to hire accounting, to hire a bookkeeper or a CPA.
Hear, hear.
To help you keep your financials in order, because the next thing that your lender is going to want to see is a comprehensive set of your financials, and we're talking about your personal tax returns. If you're already in business, your business tax returns. If you own another business, if you have a paper route, we want to see the tax returns on that as well. We want to know globally what your cash flow looks like. So we're going to want to see not only your tax returns, which tells us how well you did last year, but we want to see your interim financials, your profit and loss, and your balance sheet to date, so we can know how you're doing now. And once we have that information, it's pretty simple for us to tell you what you're qualified for and what we need to do to take the next steps as a borrower. After that, I would say the next most important thing is your personal financial statement. And every lender is going to have their own form. There's an SBA form that you fill out, and what you're doing is you're listing your assets, everything that you have on one side, and your liabilities on the other side. And then you list the collateral that you have, your house, your rental properties, your farmland, whatever it is that you have. And collateral is a very important piece of the SBA lending puzzle, even though SBA guidelines allow for lenders to lend money with absolutely no collateral. Lenders like to have some collateral to feel comfortable, at least some piece of the puzzle, either some collateral or something else positive to make them want to say yes to your loan request. So in the personal financial statement, also you'll need to, and this is something you should have all this information available electronically. You're going to want to list out, every person that you owe money to, your car note, your mortgage, any credit cards you have. You'll want to have handy the name of that lender and the account number, the original balance, and how much you owe now. Those are some things that need to go on the personal financial statement. So if you're preparing for a loan, start thinking about those things and make sure that you have all of that together before you approach your lender. Because I'm sure you've all heard, well, SBA takes a really long time. It took me, in fact, I did a loan one time. It took a year to fund, a year. But if you have all of these things together, and this one last thing that I'm going to mention, the process goes, you'd be surprised how quickly the process can actually go. So the last thing to do is just to document all the other things that you have. We're going to want to see the letter that the IRS sent you when they gave you your EIN number. We're going to see the document the Secretary of State sent you when you formed your LLC, your articles of organization for your LLC, and your operating agreement, those types of things. If you have all of that together, you'll be really surprised how quickly and smoothly the SBA process can go.
So we tell people all the time when we first meet them here at Innovation Portal, you need to have best friends. Your best friends need to be your accountant and your attorney. You need to make sure that you have that relationship that you're building in, and then document. That's incredibly important. That way we can work through that. All right, Cynthia, we're going to take a quick turn here as we think about the future, and I'm going to ask you to put on your glasses to tell you what the future here in Alabama looks like. What do you see as it looks like the funding landscape over the next 5 to 10 years here in the state of Alabama?
Okay, so I'm going to go to my favorite subject, SSBCI. Remember that we are expected to return 7 to 10x that 97, 98 million. Now that is huge for the state of Alabama because once we distribute that money, it's paid back, or investments are made, it's returned, we get to reinvest that. So it really is evergreening. Having that sort of capability in the state, I think, is a phenomenal thing. Version 1.0 of this program, I think we left the funds with the lenders. So, and because we only have a guarantee program. So if you're a lender, I don't actually know what you did with those funds. I would hope that you would use them to turn it over again so that we can keep that evergreening going. But to ensure that that happens this time around, those funds will be returned to Innovate Alabama. We will reinvest them so that it really is evergreening. So when you think about the 7 to 10x, that's a really big deal. That's a lot of funding for a lot of founders. So I'm definitely positive about what the future holds. I hope that we're gonna take advantage of these opportunities. I don't know that there'll be another SSBCI. This may be the last one ever. So we wanna maximize it. The other thing that I'll say is, I have one of my board members in the back. Dr. Chambers, raise your hand. Say hi. So one of the things that I'll say is, I really lucked out in the board department. I have a phenomenal board. And a lot of times I hear people say, well, your board members are so senior. They're very senior people, either in universities, corporations, or state government. And that's where people really start to say, I don't know how you get anything done because of the state government. But surprisingly, my board is phenomenal at allowing us to, they move barriers so that we can focus on what we do for a living. So we don't have to worry about what's going on in Montgomery. We don't have to worry about what's going on in DC. All we have to worry about is you guys and how to figure out how to get you money. Like that's what we do. And then on the flip side of that, making sure that we are touching the talent, either inside of the state, making sure that we keep them here. For those people who are not in the state, incentivizing them to come here, to build their businesses and find talent in the state of Alabama. That's what we're all about. It's such a fun thing to do every day. I can't get paid. I can't believe I get paid to do it. But don't repeat that, Dr. Chambers. But I really do love the potential of the work and what it's going to bring to the state. And again, I think like was said earlier, we're not trying to be Silicon Valley. Like we don't need to be them. We are uniquely Alabama. That's what we want to do. We want to take advantage of our landscape, of our businesses, of our knowledge, of our capability, and then we want to use funds of others. So we definitely are incentivizing funds to come inside of the state to make their investments. But here's the thing, we only invest in Alabama companies. You have to either be here or you have to agree that you're going to come here. And if you're not willing to do that, today we're not interested. That's the long and the short of it. When I started my entrepreneur journey, I didn't have an SSBCI. There was SBA, but I couldn't figure out how to get to it. And I had all of my documentation in a row. I had the experience, I had the knowledge, and it was really, really hard to maneuver. So I think the most exciting thing is, as we build this engine that we're trying to build, take advantage of the technical assistance organizations. Before you go to the lender, before you go to the investor, before you go to the accelerator, sit down and talk to the technical assistance guys, because they're going to give you sometimes data that you don't want, but you really need it before you take that plunge. I attended a session last night with a different organization that had some of their founders sort of pitching the here's my experience within the program in the last few months. And there were several founders who stood up and said, well, I thought I knew what my company was about, but this experience has taught me that I actually don't, because they got to engage people who are really going to use your product. And they were like, well, that's a nice idea, but we don't need that. And so that helped that founder sort of adjust their thinking. I think when I look 5, 10 years out, knowing that we are building that ecosystem that supports our founders, that supports our businesses, and really allows the organizations to position themselves for growth longer term. That's what I'm most excited about. That's what gets me up in the morning. That's why I left my business in order to sit in this role, because I really am excited about the potential that this brings for everybody in our state. You've just got to take that first step and take advantage of the opportunities.
Kwam, in your role, I mean, you've been in this VC space for a bit. You've seen a lot of changes. You've seen what's happening. Well, walk us through, I mean, even what's your vision of the future? I mean, you are intentionally investing in the Southeast, right? So in the recent Carter report that came out, I think it was like $15 out of every $100 in VC went to the Southeast as a whole in the first quarter of 24. That's inclusive of Georgia, that's inclusive of Florida, that's Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, and over to Louisiana. Like, tell us your why, man.
All right, I'm going to do this without getting on my full soapbox.
Okay.
But suffice it to say that we have always had talent in the Southeast. A lot of times, a lot of our states and cities have suffered from brain drain because when the opportunities weren't here, we left. We are that type of entrepreneur, right? And so a lot of times, the industry will use data that says we get all this great deal flow in the Bay or in New York, we'll just keep investing there. And as a native who spent time in New York City on Wall Street and all these other things like that, I know that you don't become infinitely smarter just by growing up or living in the Bay. Defies logic, right? I also know that the more investors fish in shallower and shallower pools, the harder it is to actually get returns. So why shouldn't investors be exploring talent that is underserved and underseen to diversify their portfolios and actually find more founders who didn't learn to think the same three ways, right? A diversity of mindsets and problem solving and opportunities to see if we can't collectively together with the full strength of this entire country solve the world's largest problems. And I think that technology has made it such that we can start proving that out now. We don't need to be in the Bay to build businesses. And I believe that all of our economies throughout the Southeast can grow and flourish without trying to be carbon copies of Silicon Valley. And somebody has to get the ball rolling. I'm not the only one. Rodney Sampson's been doing this for a long time, right? Generator's entire organization focuses on areas outside of the Bay in New York City. And so when I started this, I saw all of these seedlings and sproutings that were starting, and I said, this feels like the right time to really put the pedal to the floor and really invest in our communities. So I believe in our potential is the short of it.
What you hear from each one of these four is that their passion is to be able to serve you and see you flourish and grow. And we're so thankful for their time together. I know our time, again, as we go through these panels, it's like this panel could last forever. The previous conversation could last forever. What you've got coming up could last forever. We want to make the opportunity for your time so you can get out and network with people, but also prepare for the next breakout. So our next session starting at 10:45 is our breakout session. And just a quick logistical framework. If you're interested in understanding how to get your pitch right, you're going to be in the large flex with Stephen Riggs. So, hey, there's Logan in the back. He's the tallest guy in the room, so he's waving his hand for you. If you're looking for that, straight back behind us. If you are interested in SBA lending, you're trying to figure out what does this all look like. You heard Dennis talk about it. You're going to meet with Meg Owens over in the small flex. Thomas Nelson, will you raise your hand? There you go. And then if you are interested in this idea of, oh yeah, there's these free money things, this grant opportunity, you're going to be right here with Dr. Chambers and Chris Coker. All right, so we are excited about it. We're excited about what's happening. Make sure you grab some coffee, donuts, whatever's still around. Stay here because lunch is beyond these folks. You're going to get some great information, and we're going to have some great opportunities to come on. So meet people, ask good questions, and use the day to your advantage. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. The film might come in and put it back.
me up? For who? An adapter?
I said, hey, do you want this? And he was like, yeah. I was like, okay, I'll have an adapter.
Okay. There should be two of them around.
There was one in there. I thought I grabbed it. It's in your pocket. You picked it up.
Oh, that adapter. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about, okay. Am I live? If you would, please take a moment to start heading to your breakout room. Again, if you're interested in the grant conversation, it's right here in the main space. If you are interested in pitching and the preparation to how to build the right pitch deck, please make sure you head to the large flex. And if you're interested in conversations around SBA lending, please make sure that you head to the small flex. We encourage you again all day to network and meet folks, but please take that time to get around to those sessions.
Okay, we'll give everybody just a few minutes to settle down and take your seats. I will tell you all that if there's one thing I hate, it's following Dr. Todd Greer. It's like the actor Bradley Cooper has been up here wowing you, or maybe Mel Gibson, and then someone like Mitch McConnell comes up and tries to get your attention. But I'm here with Dr. Chris Kozer, who is from the University of South Alabama Office of Tech Transfer, and my name is Michael Chambers. I'm the Chief Economic Development Officer at South and an Associate Vice President of Research. So we work in the, handle a lot of things in the Tech Transfer Office, and our Acting Director of Tech Transfer, local attorney, patent attorney Hunter Adams is in the back of the room. Hunter, would you raise your hand? Okay, great. So here's what we're going to do. I always like to kind of gauge the audience. How many of you right now have a question that you want answered about grants in your mind? Anybody? Okay, see one in the back of the room, and we've already talked a little bit. So be thinking, if there's some questions that you would like answered, just raise your hand at some point. I'll recognize you. And before we leave here, we want to make sure that all your questions are answered. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about why apply for grants. We're going to talk about where to find the opportunities. We're going to talk about how to apply. In other words, we're going to point you in the direction of key resources. And then Dr. Kozer is going to talk about two specific federal opportunities that may apply or could apply to many of you. What we call the SBIR, STTR. Some people call it SIBR-SITR. So we're going to get a little bit into details so that you know how and if you qualify for those programs. And then at the end, we're going to talk about top tips for grant writing, and then we're going to close with the biggest mistakes that you can make when applying for grant. So that's kind of the landscape. So let's kind of get to it and make sure my clicker works here. So that's us, and I'll ask Nick to make this deck available to anyone who wants it. So you're going to see in some of these slides clickable links. So you'll be able to go to those links for those resources. All right, so why apply for a grant? So Dr. Greer said free money, and to a certain extent, it really is free money because, as many people have pointed out, when you ask for an investor to give the money to you, that investor wants a piece of your company in return, 10%, 20%, 30%. With a grant, that does not happen. The people who are offering grants typically are in alignment with you. So if you want to solve a particular problem, you're getting money through a grant from people who have an interest in you solving that problem. And it's not necessarily they want to make money. In fact, they don't want to make money. They just want the problem solved. And that's the beauty of a grant. How many people know what the valley of death is? All right, well, let me explain that a little bit. If you're an entrepreneur and you have an idea, but you haven't established proof of concept yet, so you don't know whether it works, you go to Kim and say, Kim, please invest in my company. Here's my idea. And Kim says, well, does it work? And you say, I don't know. So you go to the only people willing to give you money at that point. You take your own money, or you go to April, who's your close friend, and say, April, you believe in me. I know you know it doesn't work yet, but if you give me money, I've got a really good feeling about this. Or you go to family, the people who love you and they want you to succeed. So friends and family, that's typically what we call it. Those are the only people who are willing to invest at such a high risk before they know whether it's going to work. So the valley of death is that period of time between when you've gathered some money, yours, friends, and family, and over here where the people are only willing to invest when they know that it works, right? That is where a grant can be very helpful to you. So if you look at this list, second bullet is the critical R&D. That's what helps you cross that valley of death. You're showing proof of concept that, hey, this really works at least on a small scale. The other great thing about a grant, in many cases in the U.S. system, if you file for a grant and get it, people review many, many applications for grants. And the way many people do it is they ask the best and brightest throughout the country to sit on a panel and determine who should get the money. So we have 10 applications, we have enough money for 2, who do we give the money to? And so if it's an ovarian cancer diagnostic, they have oncologists review, for example, the applications. If you get one of these grants, guess what? All of a sudden, then you can tell other people in the community, I received a grant, let's say, from the National Science Foundation, and it was peer-reviewed, meaning really smart people decided they liked your technology, they liked your approach. So you have credibility now and validity with investors when you try to raise more money. The next bullet, non-dilutive funding. So how many people know what non-dilutive means? Non-dilutive is beautiful language to an entrepreneur because that means someone's giving you money and they're not asking for a percentage. So your ownership is not being diluted by taking this money. And that's what a grant can do. Now, opportunities often address market gaps. So if you Googled right now presidential strategic priorities, you might get a list of 10 to 15 things that say the Biden administration has said, these are critical technology areas or medical areas. And if yours aligns with that, if the problem you want to solve aligns with one of those priorities, more likely than not, there's some huge grant opportunities out there that you could take advantage of. Once you get one of these grants, depending on who it comes from, let's say it's from a private foundation, that foundation could put you in touch with other investors, other people that they know, other foundations that have like interest, and potentially even mentors. They would have people serving on their board who know a lot about perhaps the technology you're trying to develop. And what a grant also offers is greater flexibility. So if I take money from April, and in exchange, April now owns 20% of my company, and I'm going along and trying to achieve certain things, and I've got to spend the money exactly the way I told April I was going to spend the money, right? Or she's going to be pretty mad at me if I'm not following the plan. A grant can be a little more flexible. If things go wrong, I'm looking for the data doesn't pan out, I could go back to the foundation or the agency and say, listen, this isn't working, but I'd like to use the money to try a different approach. Whereas, even though April looks very reasonable, April might say, I'd really rather have the rest of my money back. The foundation or the government might say, we want you to try to continue to solve the problem. So it can be a little greater flexibility. All right, so where to look? And let me tell you, these are not exhaustive lists, but you will get, if you ask, and Nick can make this available, these are all possible sources of grant information. And I will tell you, there are two slides here. One is kind of where to look, and the other one is kind of resources. And they tend to blend a little bit. Many of these give both. So you can kind of look around. Some are free, and I'll talk about those in just a second. And some offer some opportunities to pay a little money, take a course, buy a book, etc. But Innovate Alabama, I wanted to mention that because, as Cynthia pointed out, I'm on the board. There are a lot of opportunities there. They're not necessarily grants for private companies, but they're programs that you should know about. And I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. The second one is kind of the mother lode, grants.gov. That is a website put together by the United States government. It's a searchable database, and I can show you kind of how it works in a second. But it is a great place to look not only for grant opportunities, but also they have some links to programming that you can follow up with. The rest of these, Foundation Directory, CFDA is like huge resource. These last two, depending on kind of what your business is or what your technology is, one is science and engineering, and the other one is biomedical and healthcare. Those are the two primary, I'd say two of the primary sources of funding that come through the national government. And Dr. Kozer will talk in just a few minutes about some other agencies that will also offer opportunities. So this is where to look. Let's see. There we go. All right. So I wanted to show you this. This is from grants.gov. So if you go to this website, navigate here, it's a search engine. So here, up in the top left corner, I put in the word, I'm not sure you can see it, diabetes. So both my parents, now deceased, type 2 diabetic. So, I'm monitor that pretty carefully, worried about that. So I said, well, I'm going to put in the word diabetes up here in the search engine. I click search, and then all of a sudden, all these grant opportunities start showing up. And these links here go directly to the description of the grant opportunity. Now, you could put another keyword there. You can scroll down a little more and slice and dice your search even more. So this is a great place to start. This would typically only give you governmental opportunities, not necessarily private foundations. And so we'll talk a little more about that in a second. So what resources show you how to apply? Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but grants.gov is free. That's a great one. And the other one I'd put a plug in is called the Kauffman Foundation. It's based in Kansas City. Most of what it offers is free and very directed to entrepreneurs. So they have a lot of programs and resources. Grantsmanship Center, they have some training and workshops. Those are typically for a fee, but if you wanted to go spend 2 days in a particular workshop or online training, those are offered. Candid is also for a fee, but it's a very extensive website offering resources. And then this one is NGOs, that stands for non-governmental organizations, which I know doesn't really apply to many of you for private companies, but they have a lot of good resources on grant writing and how to do it. So that's something that you should take a look at as well. So I'm going to pause there and turn it over to Dr. Kozer. This is the passing of the clicker. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Well, let me, any questions so far on those? Okay, great.
All right. So I want to highlight two specific grants that are available to small businesses. And like Michael said before, they're usually referred to as SBIR or SIBR, and then the sister grant is STTR or SITR. And all the information that I'm going to share with you today can be found at sbir.gov. There are about 100 side web pages worth of information, 1,200 pages worth of documents to sift through. I'm going to provide you the core of that information, but it's a wealth of information about government needs, government-issued directives, okay? So SBIR and STTR, they are two federal initiatives that are specifically aimed toward fostering innovation and entrepreneurship and technological advancement within the small businesses. Small businesses are the target of these grant programs. And like Dr. Chambers mentioned before, they provide non-dilutive capital. Remember, that's you get to keep your business, they give you money, but in exchange, you are now being responsive to a need that that government organization or agency has. So for example, the Air Force might give out an RFA for a specific type of, cleaner for their airline jet fuel. That would be responsive, and you would be filling their need. This website, like I said, has just a wealth of information, but it covers these programs cover a wealth of different needs and industries. So the SBIR is actually the largest. Any government organization that maintains at least $100 million in federal budget expenditures is required to have an SBIR program. The sister program to this is the STTR. It's only for those that have over $1 billion allocated to them for funding. So 12 different federal agencies have SBIRs, and only 5 have STTRs. But they are competitive, and they're specifically designed for research and development. For the SBIR, the applicant is the small business, and the small business must assemble the program packet to submit for the grants and the awards, and the award size is dependent on the phase of the awards. Now, there are different phases that your company may be in with a product. The initial phase would be phase 1, where you have an idea, but you don't have a feasibility or a prototype of that product or that solution. Phase 1 is a small pot of money designed to provide you to get over that valley of death. What are we going to do to make that product actually exist? The second phase, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, is going to be the larger, more market-focused commercialization step. That's when we're starting to talk about million-dollar grants. And this is when you then have a prototype, but you now need to work on commercializing it, moving that product into the market, identifying that need. The STTR is slightly unique compared to the SBIR. The STTR is about technology transfer. In this grant, the expectation is that you are going to partner with an institution, a research institution, such as a university or a federal laboratory, to take some of their technology or technology that you're both interested in developing, do research and development on it, and then move that to market. Now, for example, University of South Alabama, Auburn, Alabama, UAH, all of our institutes of higher education within the state maintain portfolios of technology that they are actively trying to transfer. Same thing with national laboratories. They have technology transfer offices. You can reach out, you can actually look at their websites, and they can tell you what they are working on to see if your interests align. So if you are interested, like Dr. Chambers said, in diabetes, you can go to any website of a technology transfer office. It's not limited to Alabama, but there are definite pros of doing so, and see whether or not they have something that you find of value that you would be willing to work toward. But these both are designed to bridge that gap between having the idea and bringing it to market. Now, this is unfortunately a lot smaller, and this PowerPoint will be available hopefully after, but there are certain criteria and guidelines that you have to follow for these applications. The SBIR, it has a 6 months, some of them are up to 12-month window of funding, and it ranges from about $50,000 to $250,000 in awards. You can actually push that all the way to, I believe the technical limit is $306,000 now, and that's a 12-month period to pay for prototype and research and development. Same for STTR, but the expectation is that because you're working with another organization, you would be needing a little bit more time to collaborate and do data analysis and working toward this shared goal. So it's usually about 12 months with the same award funding. One of the big things is the allocation of effort. So you're a small business, you can't do everything, but you know somebody who can. So in this situation, your small business has to do a certain % effort toward this project And the other percent of effort, the remaining percentage, can be done by someone else. For a small business, for the SBIR, you need to be able to do 2/3 of the work by yourself in your company. And the other third can be done with another organization, a university, a national laboratory, or another person who has a small business. You do not have to partner with a research institute on the SBIR, but with the STTR, you are required to. In that situation, the effort is expected to be about 40% for the small business, and the remaining 30% has to be at a minimum from the university side. And that remaining 30% that has not been allocated can be split however you want. You can have a third partner, whatever, okay? So this is phase one. It lasts for about a year, 6 months to a year. And then you can transfer or convert your award to a phase two. Say, for example, your product development went spectacularly. And after 6 to 12 months, you now have a prototype, you have a commercial plan, you have a product that you think is going to make super lots of money, all right? And you have visions of yachts in your future, okay? The the phase two award is going to allow you to transition into that closer to market product. And in this phase, it's about 2 years, and the funds are anywhere between $750,000 to $2 million, okay? And those awards are provided to the company who is doing this commercialization. In this phase two, it's expected that you're going to have more partnerships, your company is going to continue working to develop these products, and you're going to have about 50% effort dedicated by your company. Now, the allocation remains the same for the STTR in phase two, considering that there's probably still a lot of research costs that have to be, or research that has to be performed. But there's additional funds, so you'll be able to actually expand what your product is actually used for. You do not, again, have to partner with a research institute for the SBIR. Any company can apply for this as long as it's responsive to the government agency's needs, or it has a use, okay? I'm often reminded of an episode of The Office where, I don't know if anybody watches that or has watched it, David Wallace actually creates a toy called Suck It. And it's designed to suck toys up off the room to clean the room. Obviously, a toy-making machine like that probably doesn't have a market. What turns out is that it was responsive to an Army need. So even though the product may not have been originally designed to fill that goal, it had a very specific use for the Army, and then it became a multi-million-dollar product, okay? So think about multiple dimensions of your product. Is there a use? It doesn't have to be defense. It could be health industries. It could be NASA. A lot of different government agencies utilize this. So, eligibility. Who can apply for this? And the first and foremost is that your company, the company is the applicant. They must be for profit. Nonprofits cannot submit these, and if you work with the university, they will not be preparing the grant for you. They can assist in providing you documents that you need to submit the packet, but the company has to provide and actually submit it. You have to be a small business, and the SBIR and STTR defines a small business as any size total with affiliates and part-time workers as under 500 employees. That's obviously most small businesses. At 500, you start not becoming a small business. In fact, over 100, I start to question whether or not you're a small business. The ownership and control, the small business has to be majority owned and controlled by U.S. citizens or permanent residents. You are welcome to partner with foreign entities, foreign personnel, as long as they don't have more than 49% control, okay? The primary owners have to be 51% or more. And then the last thing is the location of work. So the research and development portion of this grant has to be done stateside, okay? You have to do it in the United States. They don't want you to pay for research and development done in Belgium, okay? There are exceptions. Obviously, if the only place that you can do this work is in a laboratory that has just the right amount of equipment in Belgium, then they will allow it, but you need to speak with the program officer, the person who's in charge of that grant, okay? The last thing I want to mention is that with respect to the SBIR and STTRs, Innovate Alabama, as you heard from Cynthia Crutchfield earlier, Innovate Alabama has a matching program. If you do get a Phase 1 or Phase 2 award, Innovate Alabama will it makes you eligible for additional funding from Innovate Alabama if your business is located primarily in Alabama, okay? And they will match up to certain limits, and you can go to Innovate Alabama website and search through that, and they'll tell you how much that they are willing to match if you have been awarded and if you meet other eligibility criteria, okay? So there's a considerable amount of money available to you if you decide to go down this road. Now, who is giving the money? There are 12 different organizations here. Each one of them, you can go to the SBIR.gov website and you can look up one-pagers on each of them and their specific needs, what they are looking for. And you'll see there's a variety of different topics. But just because it provides grant funding doesn't mean it's all equivalent. In certain situations, for example, the DoD, if you look down here on the bottom of the right, they take up about half of all funding that is allocated to SBIRs and STTRs. So you can apply for a grant to the DOE or the EPA, but just know that their part of the pot is going to be considerably smaller. But roughly the government gives out about 3,000 of these grants per year, okay, in total between SBIRs and STTRs, and I believe the allocation is somewhere close to about $5 billion. Okay? So, the last thing I want to point out here is with respect to the website. If you go to sbir.gov, in there, there's a place to look for agency one-pagers. And every agency that I just listed on the previous page will have a sheet like this. This one right here is the Department of Defense. It tells you what their allocation is for their fiscal year 23 budget, what their actually number of awards that they've provided. Here's a separate one for the National Institutes of Health, which focuses not on defense, but on health issues. And they look for varying types of applications. In some cases, they may not know what they're looking for. They may say, I never thought this could be a thing. You can provide them with a product and tell them how it might be useful, and they will review it and then determine whether or not that actually has a use, or they think it'll be good for treatments or research in the future. But I do want to highlight that down here on the bottom left, there's an area that says topic areas and areas of interest. The first one for DoD is biotechnology, which also happens to be what NIH looks for. So even though you might apply and you think, I got a military dimension to this product, ask yourself, if you apply, would another institute also find use to this, and whether or not it might be responsive to one of their needs? Maybe your grant or your application, it can be tweaked a little bit to make it responsive to a specific need. So, at this point, I will turn it back to Dr. Chambers to finish up.
So we told you it was going to be a little technical, and that's the downside. It's the federal government, so there are going to be a lot of rules and regs. So just a few minutes about the downside, perhaps, of grants. One, I would tell you that they're great to kind of get you off the ground, so to speak, to cover that valley of death. But as a business, very few businesses succeed consistently relying on grants. One, because they just take too long. In other words, you apply and you wait months and you have no further contact with that agency. Whereas if I'm trying to get April to invest, I meet April today, set up a meeting tomorrow, I pitch, she has a week or two to consider it, and then I know within a couple of weeks whether I've got the money. If I've got the money, I'm off the races. If not, then I'm looking to set up another meeting. So the time delay with grants and not knowing, you can't just wait 4 months and then pray that you get the grant. So from a long-term point of view, very few companies consist on grants. And in fact, those that do sometimes can kind of get a negative reputation among investors because they're not making a product so much as they're just fulfilling government requirements. You know, the government wants this built, they build it. So it's almost living off government grants, contracts rather than grants. The other thing I'd mention too is research the opportunity carefully, because some of them have pretty intricate requirements on reimbursement. In other words, most people think it's a $100,000 grant, the government sends me a check for $100,000 and I'm off to the races. Many of them don't work like that. Many of them require us or you to incur the expense, pay for the expense, and then send an invoice to the government. So you've got to cover that expense on the front end. And for many companies, that's not a possibility. The other thing to be aware of is many of these agencies, in my personal opinion, don't have a lot of experience running a business, but they're very interested in assessment and metrics. So, you know, April gets a grant, and after, you know, every month they want to report about how many people you saw and get them to fill out a form saying this is how it helped them. I mean, it's just kind of overwhelming what some of the requirements might be. So be careful about that. So let's pivot now, kind of the final part here. Whoops. All right, top tips for grant writing. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are the things that come to my mind. We talked about this earlier. Address a key priority. Wherever you're applying, I mean, you don't want to go to the American Cancer Society and apply for a grant on, I don't know, ophthalmology that's not cancer related, you know, something related to the eye, or the Heart Foundation and you're trying to get a technology for the eye. Find the right fit and address the priority of that particular organization. And as Chris pointed out, the government agencies will give you a list of what they're looking for many times. And foundations, it should be or could be obvious, and you use these search engines to find out. The second one is a little tricky because we all want free money, right? And this kind of requires an assessment of yourself and your organization. You know, before you spend weeks and weeks and maybe money writing a grant, it's like, does my organization really have a chance? That's the first thing. You know, are we competitive? And then is, you know, am I the best person to sign off as the leader on the grant? Or should it be a colleague with 20 years of experience in this? You know, many of us feel like, gee, you know, it was my idea, I want to lead the effort, but if they look and the person who's asking for the grant, who's saying they're going to manage it, doesn't really have the best experience compared to someone else gets the grant, right? So that's a little self-assessment that you need. The other one is be collaborative. And I think, at least in this area, we have a really good history of reaching out and collaborating with other folks, and this is in the realm of community grants. How many of you, kind of your either business or your idea is kind of education focused? Any of you? Okay. So, you know, that in particular is a good area to collaborate with others. So you're making it about not just you, but some other organizations that can provide input. So it's not only just including stakeholders, sometimes it's a benefit to reach out geographically. You know, we have the same problem that Gulfport Biloxi has, for example, or we have the same problem that counties to the north of us. So you show a broader collaboration. And federal agencies in particular really like to see that broad collaboration among potential stakeholders. So that's a way to try to increase the odds. Next one I'd say is have a hook. And that one's hard to describe, but you know, every good story, maybe it's a critical need. You're telling a story about, you know, a particular town. It could be, you know, the hook could be Hurricane Sally, or it could be, you know, just devastation of whatever and the community trying to get over that, or your organization, your company being a part of that. So having a hook sometimes is an important part. The other thing from time to time, depending on the grant opportunity, is you not only get the money, but you kind of say, you know, if you give me this money and I develop this curriculum or I develop this product, I am going to create a pilot on how other people in the United States can either create that product, or I'm going to have a curriculum that other people can use, and I'll make it available, maybe for a fee, I don't know, but that's a hook in a sense as well. It's kind of creating that pilot. Many grant opportunities, particularly on the federal level, require letters of support. And there are letters of support, and then there are letters of support. So you're reaching out, trying to get other people to support. It could be city, county officials, governmental officials, other organizations. What many people like is, well, send me the letter you want me to sign, and makes it really easy for them. On the other hand, you can imagine if you're reviewing the grant and all the letters of support are identical, right? So depending on the amount of time and resources you have, crafting each of those letters differently could be a critical thing, and putting a little bit about the company in there. And if you do draft those in advance, I would suggest you don't just say something about the company that you think is true. Go to the website and literally copy language that the company has said about themselves. And so then when you send that letter of support to them, you say, well, I hope this description is accurate. I took it from your website verbatim. So that's very helpful. If you go to the big shots, let's say you want Airbus to give you a letter of support, understand that that is a public international company, and if you have someone with authority to sign that letter, it has to go through legal. There may be a particular person designated to approve that letter. So that takes time, and so start well in advance. But that's also the important thing of telling them where you got that language. And commitments, some agencies ask for an actual commitment, and that is just always a problem, because no company says, I'm willing to give you $25,000 if you get this grant. Well, their company could go just down in a basket in the next quarter, and very few companies are willing to make a firm financial commitment. So that's a hurdle you just have to overcome, but look in the application and see what's required. Start early. I can't emphasize that enough. Chris and I and Hunter, we have one that's due in September that we've already kind of started working on. We have another one that requires a letter of intent, and this kind of helps me explain another. Some of these opportunities, they say, in June, give us a one-page letter of intent saying what you want to do, what are you going to use the money for. And then they look at all those letters of intent, and that's an easy one-pager, right? Then they look at those 100 letters, and they pick 30. And they say, okay, of the 30 they picked, in September, give us a 10-pager with letters of support. And so that's due in August. And so they'll take those 30, look at it, and then select 10, and then invite those 10 to file a full 30-page proposal the next February, for example. So be aware that, particularly of the larger grants, that's the way it can work sometimes. All right, so those are the top tips. Here are the top mistakes. In some cases, these are just mirror images of the top tips, in a sense. So you file a grant, and there's just no alignment with the grant goals or mission of either the foundation or the agency. You didn't do your homework. You didn't look at what they were really looking for, and you're asking for money to do something that's really not on their radar, just does not apply. Weak needs assessment. What does that mean? You see a lot in grant opportunities about a needs assessment. What does that mean? It means, why do this? Why is it important? Why is it critical? Why should we care? That's what you're trying to show with a needs assessment. This is a critical issue in my community because ... Here's the data that supports that with footnotes or highlights or hyperlinks. Lack of clarity and specificity. If your idea is too general and just not specific on what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who's going to do it, why they're the best people to do it, then it's going to look just like that, just too general to fund. Poor budget justification. What does that mean? Many of these grant opportunities have a document called budget justification. And what that means is you might have a spreadsheet that shows the dollar amounts, but many of them require a separate document saying, well, we've asked for $25,000 to fund 25% of, $25,000 for April. We're going to give April $25,000 every year under this grant. Well, in the budget justification, you would say, this is why we're giving April $25,000, because she's only going to spend, her salary is $100,000 per year normally. She's going to spend 25% of her time, and this is why it's $25,000. For equipment, you would explain why the equipment's necessary, things that you cannot explain in a spreadsheet. So if you can't justify your spreadsheet in this budget justification, the people reviewing it are going to say, they just want the money. They can't explain why they need it. And that's why the budget justification needs to be strong and clear. If the people who need to be in your grant with you are not, you haven't included key stakeholders, then that's a problem. Weak or no evaluation. So in the investor context, April gives me money for my startup. April would like to hear from me about every 90 days. One of my mentors was from a company called Medtronic, and he lived and died by, he would say, good news, bad news, or no news every 90 days. So that's something, if you have investors, to remember. People don't like just to give you money and then never hear from you until, what's the worst case scenario? You need more money. That just drives them crazy. It drives me crazy. So good news, bad news, or no news every 90 days. Well, in the investor context, that's what you want to hear. In the grant context, really what they expect is a strong evaluation, something to, how do you determine success at the end? And that's typically called like an evaluation or an assessment tool. So many of these grants, they want to be able to show the people that give them money, particularly private foundations, that we spent your contributions well, because when we gave April this money, that technology worked and 1,000 lives were saved in 3 months, for example. Good job, April. So next to last one, failure to follow guidelines or instructions. That could very easily be at the very top. When you see that application, we call them solicitations,